Today I'm going to show you how to build a panorama photographed just before sunset with intense backlight. It's full of contrast and quite dramatic. I will use Photoshop starting with Camera Raw, and once in Photoshop itself I will use two different plugins as well to finish this beautiful panorama. The image that I'm showing you today is from Bhutan, and we are near a small town called Jakar, which is in the eastern end of the country. We shoot the amazing sun as it sets down over the mountain, and we are looking toward the Kurjey Lhakhang Buddhist temple. So we take the 5 images that we shot for this panorama together into Camera Raw in Photoshop. As you can see, they come down in the film strip, 5 images. We then select them all together, go back in to our drop-down menu, and we merge to panorama. Interestingly, I'm on spherical, that is my favourite. This time I'm going to use the boundary warp, and I'm going to take it to 100%. I will just check if cylindrical is the answer, and it's not. Too much foreground, I don't want that. So back to spherical at 100%, and then we merge that image, saving the PSD file in the folder that we have the 5 images. Now while that's building in Camera Raw, we can do a few things, and I always like to do the gradient tool, carefully selecting my colour and the exposure. Colour seems pretty right, temperature's quite warm, and there's a little bit of tint there. Once we've done that, we can then use our sliders, of course, always using the highlights, whites and shadows. First of all, just checking that cloud is the main issue that we have here, because this is intense backlight. We're going to show you how to do that. Meanwhile, we just look at the clarity and the texture and pump the vibrance right up to near 70%, and then adjust the temperature to suit that. Take it right up to nearly 7,000 Kelvin and a little bit more tint. That's looking pretty good. Okay, before we finish, I'm going to go into the hue and saturation. First of all, the saturation, bring up my yellows, oranges and reds, over to the hue, and then warm that. We want to pop a little bit more yellow and orange toning into it, and the greens back towards a limey colour, just a little bit. There we have it. We just watch those sliders carefully. I'm also going to have a look at my luminance and just pop that up a little bit as well. That just takes out the noise just a touch in this image. Because we are shooting backlight, there will be a bit of noise in it, and that looks pretty good. So we can open that now, and that will then take this built image into Photoshop itself. Okay, so once the image has been seen and delivered to us in Photoshop, I'm going to show you, first of all, we have a little bit of fall off in the light in the sky. Now, just being very selective in our normal mode with the clone tool, we just clone that sky out a little bit so that it becomes slightly lighter in those corners. That's pretty good. We'll do it on both sides. There's a little bit of art to this, and that's why it's very, very important that our opacity is right down. I'm only using about 1/3 of the total opacity, so just get that right. Now once I've done that, I'm not going to do any more to this until I actually work it in another program. So I'm going to a different plugin. First of all though, I will save it back into the folder where we have the PNG file. We won't click that off. We'll just hide Photoshop and we'll wait for it to come in. See, there's our original pano here. Now we're going to take it into Luminar. Luminar is a fantastic program for doing certain things, and one of them I love is when we have a backlight image, and you can see here I've got some crepuscular rays coming out of the image up the top there, here with the sun going behind that cloud. So I'm going to add a little bit more of the crepuscular rays using the sun rays feature. Now this is quite technical. We need, first of all, using the X and Y buttons to bring the actual source of the sunlight into the right spot. Once we've established that, we then need to work through both the sun rays and the sun with its intensity. First of all, its warmth on both of them, and then we're going to look at the radius, the glow radius, the amount that we want to have in each image, and the final look of the image, depending on whether you want a heap of crepuscular rays coming out or just a bit. Also the number of rays and how long. All this makes for each image to be totally different from maybe the last one that you did. Very important that. You also need to make it look as natural as possible. So when you randomize, oftentimes it's better to have less rays than more. And we also need to match what was already there. As you can see, I've got those crepuscular rays coming out into those lighter areas, so it looks completely natural. A little bit of tweaking is required, but you'll find that when you use this program quite a few times, you will get very used to it, and it really, really works well. Okay, we just finally adjust the penetration. You can see that I wanted a little bit more coming out in front of those trees. So once we've done what we need to that image, we can then export it back into the folder. So I'm looking here, it's in desktop. I want to take it back in to the recent folder where I had it, which is down here. I click on that, save that, and this is a pretty powerful program, but it's also a very, very large file. So it does take a little while for that image to be exported back to your folder. So it's thinking now and processing that. Once we've got it back, of course, into the folder with just this feature that we've done in Luminar, we can then take it back into Photoshop itself. I think it's just about done. As I said, it is rather a large file and it does take a while. Here we go. It's taken it back into our folder, and you'll see up there on the left here, we have a different file name. It actually uses an E in the JPEG rather than JPG. This is the one we want. We're going to take it back into Photoshop itself. Just waiting for my computer to work out that I do want to do that and take it back in there. Your computer's thinking, and here it's done it. So you can see now that we have both these files in here. This is the one I want to work on, the one that I've finished that part of the image in Luminar. We're going to work on our light first of all. I want to change the intensity and the color, or the tint rather, of the sun itself and what it's doing to those clouds up there in the top part of the image. So carefully selecting my color, I will then carefully work vivid light under 10% and just bring, there we go, we're just bringing a little bit more redness and orange into that to make it look a little more natural. So we do the coloring first of all. That's it. I think we've just about got enough there now. We can change the hue saturation on the sun itself. So we're doing this here we go. I'm going to change the hue and bring the saturation up. I was just thinking there what would be the best thing to do. So carefully tweak both the saturation and the hue till we get it just right. And then of course we'll fill that mask with black. Now we're working on the rest of the image itself, which is the crepuscular rays. Now, as we work these crepuscular rays, we need to be very selective to the size of our brush. You'll notice that some of the rays are wider and some are thinner, so we need to make sure that we have everything that we want there looking as natural as possible. Sometimes we can overdo it. We need to go back into our history and make sure that we have it looking just right. And of course, we can change the opacity so that if we need to touch it up or tweak it a little bit more, just a little by little, we can have the opacity right down. As you can see, I've turned it back to 4%. Next couple of areas I want to work in are what's actually lit by the sunset. You'll notice over there on the right we've got the temple itself, and over on the left we've got those trees. I just want to tweak that up a little bit more. After filling it with black, you can see now that I'm bringing out the areas that needed the tweaking. I didn't want to do it to the whole image there. It just popped now. That's really working it beautifully. Okay, so we can flatten that. Now we're going to get the content aware brush tool, and we're going to get rid of all the rubbish that's been lying around here in the foreground. There's quite a bit we need to work through. We call these the highlights of our images that we don't want to see, or eye magnets. Our eye goes directly to these bright spots, and it's just a matter of cloning out all those bits and pieces of rubbish and other little bright spots that we mightn't like. As you can see over here in the right side of the frame, we get rid of those as well, and just work carefully through the image till we have most of it gone. That's looking a lot better now. We can clean all that up rather nicely. Okay, going to change my brush now, the color, to a very, very light warm tone, and I'm just going to carefully brush through with vivid light and watch our opacity again. 9 or 10% is more than enough. And just where the trees are, a little bit more light on these. I can see it, the brushwork at the front needs doing, a little bit more over here at the temple. Just going to tone that up a little bit more for the foliage in the front. It's got some light shining on it, and we just want to highlight that slightly more, make it a little bit more intense. And that's working very fine now. It really pops, and that complements the light that's in the background. We've got some nice light in the front, light through the middle ground, and light up the top as well. So that's looking rather nice. Okay, now I just want to touch up the river a little bit. Tiny little bit of a bright blue through there. The sun's shining on it, not directly, but there is light there, and we just want to highlight that slightly more to make that river pop. We've got that beautiful S-curve coming through there, and we just want to make that a lot nicer. Okay, we're going to pop into Vivisa now. That's a Nik plugin, and I'm going to show you, I've shown you this before in my previous panorama presentations, but take it up more than you'll ever need, right up into near 60%. This will pop the whole photograph with structure, way overdone, but we make a mask and we fill that with black, and we're just going to, in our normal mode, around 80%. We won't go right up to the 100. Here we go. Where it's slightly a little bit soft, we're just going to pop a little bit of structure in there, and that highlights that middle ground where the light is beaming to slightly more, and it gives it an overall sharp tone. That's looking really, really nice. Okay, finally we just adjust our image As you may be aware from previous presentations, I like around 42-inch width, and I'm going to bring that up to 18 inches. There it goes. That looks a lot better. Just a stroke round that now. Two pixels on the inside. We'll go into the black screen and have a quick look at that. So we ended up with a beautiful image full of contrast, full of drama, with crepuscular rays shining over out across the water there. Absolutely lovely. So we'll just save that, and that image is finished. This panorama was a little different in that we were working in difficult light. Backlight is always the hardest to shoot for, but it can be the most rewarding. It was a fine example of how you can still find a panorama in almost all situations that you photograph in, and in this instance by turning something as intense as the backlight into a feature itself. The sun and the crepuscular rays became the essence of the panorama. The end result is both expansive and impressive. Until next time, thank you very much for watching.